Great. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. We are very happy to host this webinar. I am Eloïse. I'm the Communications Manager for Citizens Climate Europe, and I'm based in Paris. I am very happy to co-host today with my counterparts in Spain, Belen. So today we're going to be talking about climate change and its relationship to the coronavirus and vice versa. But we're not going to talk about only the problems. We are going to focus on the solutions available to us. So our two speakers today have never met in person, but they have a lot in common. They both have a medical background, and they are actively participating in the fight for climate. So let me now introduce you to our guests. So joining us today from Boston, USA, is the Dr. Tamara Kellogg. She is an emergency physician and has paused her practice to found One Common Heart, a small NGO that supports indigenous knowledge and language in Panama. She has also founded and led Citizens Climate Lobby Panama, and is currently the co-coordinator for the Latin American region for CCL. Our second guest today, the Dr. Rafael Pinilla, is at the forefront of the pandemic, as he is acting as the director of a medicalized hotel in Alicante, Spain. He is also a PhD in economics and the leader of Citizens Climate Lobby Spain. So a very warm welcome to you both, Tami and Rafael.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here.
Thank you very much, Eloïse. I'm pleased to meet you.
We're very happy to have you today. So as an introduction, as you are both doctors but live in different parts of the world, the USA and Spain, could you tell us about your experience of the outbreak? So maybe Rafael, you can start.
Well, currently in Spain is the second country with the most declared cases of COVID-19 after the United States. But concerning the size of our population, we have had more cases and more deaths per inhabitant than the United States. So we are the first. We were, together with Italy, one of the first countries hit hard by the virus. The month of March was very tough because the epidemic grew very fast. The government waited to decide the strict confinement to the population until March 13th. Then we are only about 100 accumulated deaths, but only 20 days later, we had almost 1,000 deaths per day. Hospitals in Madrid were overflowed. Elemental material was missing to protect health professionals. Many solutions had to be improvised in a great effort. Among these measures, create new hospitals or medicalized hotels, such as the hotel I ran. In the first week of the April, we were able to see that effect of the measures, and the number of daily deaths began to drop slowly. We continue to have today a bit less than 200 deaths a day from COVID-19, but we already have the perception that the situation is so much more controlled. So the government has begun to open the economy step by step, although the effort must be continued because we will remain at risk as long as we do not have an effective treatment or a vaccine to prevent infection.
Thank you very much, Rafael. Tami, would you like to share your view?
Yes. Firstly, Rafael, I honor you for your work and I thank you. The situation there has been dire. Over here in the Americas, it's a very large territory and the experiences are very different depending upon where people are. So cities like New York City, also Guayaquil in Ecuador or Manaus in Brazil have been overrun, similar to what you experienced. But there are rural areas and other cities where the cases are very few, or sometimes even zero. And in those places, understandably, the people are wondering why they are being limited. It's not affecting them, or they don't feel like it will affect them. And, interestingly, this parallels what we see with global heating, with climate change, where surveys, for example, by the Yale Center on Climate Communications show that there is often a disconnect between whether we think that climate change is happening and whether we think it's going to affect us. So in the United States, where this difference is particularly great, their survey shows that 69% of Americans think that climate change is happening, and well over 60% think it will harm plants and animals and people in developing countries or even future generations. But only 42% think that it will harm them personally. And so we often put blinders on even when the facts show us otherwise. And that's one of the similarities that we see between these two phenomena. Eloïse, you are muted.
Thank you. So during the confinement, the virus has monopolized most of the attention, but we are already seeing some positive effects on the environment due to the hold of production activities. So according to you, how can the epidemic influence actions for climate? But also, do you think it will delay the measures against climate change, or will it accelerate the adoption of more sustainable technologies? Tami?
So that's the big question, right? We are in this grand pause, and it's hard to know how we're going to move out of it. Most people, I think, will see that we're not changing our infrastructure at this point. So as we reopen our economies or go back to work, it's very likely that we will go back to business as usual. But it is an opportunity, right? We've all had to stop, and now we can think. So we have an opportunity to put into place policies that will change our direction so that as we return to a society that is healthier and that is more just. So I've noticed that, what this is showing us as we all walk around wearing masks in public now, that what is in our air really matters. And I think we're beginning to feel that in our bodies and our bones. There's the WHO estimates that 4.2 million people a year die from air pollution. So that is vastly more than than we even anticipate, hopefully, from this pandemic, and may it be far less from this pandemic. But we're seeing some correlations as well that air pollution makes outcomes from COVID-19 much worse. So there was a study here by the Harvard School of Public Health that showed a very tiny increase of 1 microgram per cubic millimeter in particulate matters, the little particles of pollution, results in an 8% increase in mortality from COVID-19. And we've seen other studies that show that diesel exhaust, diesel smoke directly causes changes in electrocardiograms, and it directly causes inflammatory substances in our blood. So I think that we get to choose now how we're going to go forward. And while we need to honor that our lawmakers need to focus on this immediate crisis, they can also hear from us that we are still thinking about the longer term health of our societies, and that we could take this opportunity to rebuild in a better fashion.
Thank you, Tami. Rafael?
Well, for now, in a short time, it is clear that climate change has disappeared from newspapers' headlines, and the activists will not be able to carry out many of the planned actions. But social distancing and economic consequences compel us to review behaviors and policies. So I think that we can be optimistic about changes within the next months. absolutely agree with Tami about this is an opportunity to learn and to make an important change. We must prepare better for the next pandemic, and we must also better understand the need to act as soon as possible to prevent the worst consequences of climate change.
So that's actually a great link to my next question. So you're both climate campaigners. What can governments learn from the current pandemic that they can apply to the climate crisis? Maybe Rafael, you can start.
Yeah, I think we have much to learn from the pandemic because there are some interesting similarities. First, pandemic and climate change are both global threats for the whole planet and the human species. So we need to learn to improve our capacity for cooperation on a planetary scale. Second, we knew since many years ago that a pandemic would occur, but we were not prepared. And we also know today, from more than 50 years, that global warming is taking place. Climate change is underway. We need to get ready for the changes coming and to act to slow down the process. If we do not work as up, the process would take speed and become unstoppable. We need to avoid that evolution. Third, in both cases, we do not have all the knowledge we would like. So there is a risk of wait and see. It would be a fatal mistake. We know enough to act just now. We know that the causes of global warming are and what to do to prevent the worst consequences. Of course, we also need to improve our knowledge, but that cannot be a pretext to delay action. And fourth, a crucial issue. In both cases, there is a delay between the action and the consequences. In the coronavirus epidemic, hospitalization and death occur 2 or 3 weeks after infection. A common mistake has been to wait for seeing as the death toll grows before acting. In 3 weeks, without control, the number of disease could double between 5 and 7 times. The longer we wait, the more difficult it is to control because the problem gets bigger and bigger. In the case of climate change, it's quite similar. We also have a lag between causes and effects. Carbon emissions and other greenhouse gases accumulate in the atmosphere for decades before we can see the consequences. In this case, the delay is not 2 or 3 weeks, but 20 or 30 years. We are already at the moment when everyone can see the problem exists. We in Spain have a poll, and people in Spain, about 95% of people believe that climate change exists. But we have wasted a lot of time yet. Scientists believe that it is not too late, and the best time to act is ASAP, because the delayed effect also means that the positive impact of our actions will take over 20 or 30 years to arrive. This means that warming is going to contribute for at least 2 or 3 decades, even if we act today. We have visualized this effect of delay in the course of the pandemic. Probably the most important thing we can learn is the importance of working ASAP to reverse carbon emissions.
That was great. Thank you, Rafael. Tami?
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly, Rafael, that preparedness makes a difference and matters. And I think that's one of the largest lessons in this. And also listening to the people who have spent their lives learning about the thing that you're worried about. So they may not be perfect, but they're sort of all we have. When somebody, as a species, all we can do is observe what's around us and draw conclusions. And we're good at that. And we've learned how to do it in a way that's not so prone to bias in how we view things. And that way we call science. But it simply shows us the facts more clearly. And so I would encourage leaders to listen to the people who've spent their lives learning how to observe the phenomenon that we're concerned about. And also the other message I would want to say is that health matters. And if you unify people around health, you unify them. That's what happens. We don't think about politics anymore because we all have bodies. So if we're concerned about creating the political will for action, it's hard to argue against health and well-being. So that's really the main messaging. You know, being in denial about something is a natural stage of mourning when we're unsure or when we fear a loss. And so it's understandable, and we can accept that. And those of us who perhaps have been willing to admit that there is a problem can provide the space for the people who've taken their time to see it and to come out of their hole. You know, so instead of grandstanding or criticizing them for why did you take so long, you know, to say, great, I'm so happy you're here, let's go to work. Because it is a natural human emotional thing to say, I don't like the way this looks, and so I'm going to pretend it's not here. And we did that in many places with this virus and this pandemic, and we are still doing it with global heating.
Thank you, Tami. So amongst the measures that governments are considering in certain countries is the promotion of a universal income to help citizens and the economy out of the crisis, including Spain. So what is your view, and how does a climate income work, and how can it help? Rafael?
Well, the coronavirus pandemic is a big problem, but it is not the worst. I think the most significant problems for humanity are world climate change and economic inequality. We cannot fight against poverty, increasing carbon emissions, nor can fight against climate change, increasing poverty. It is imperative to find a way to cope with climate change and poverty in the world at the same time. This is the reason because the climate income framework is the best policy. We propose to tax over all carbon emissions and use the collection to return a climate income to the citizens in an egalitarian way. This will be a significant universal basic income for all. In this way, we help to markets to work properly. With a carbon tax, we put the price to carbon. Then consumers and firms will change from buying intensive carbon goods towards low carbon products. With a universal basic income, we give all people the power to buy in the market. If we look for a well-functioning market economy for all, we need to increase the prices of the pollutants, and we also need to guarantee all people access to the market. Then the market will work properly, and if not, it not works.
Thank you. That was a great insight, Rafael. Tami?
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly. A plan of climate income where you put a price on pollution and then pay the people is something that is one of those policies we could put into place now that would guide our rebuilding process or our return, so that it's not a return, but a step forward. And it's the fairest, it's the most just, and it's the most efficient way to create that transformation.
Thank you very much. And so, do you have any insights on what politicians think about it? Tami?
So it's an excellent question, because it's one of the most important questions, right? It's the lawmakers who need to pass these types of policies. They create the framework that we all function within. And so they are in the position of power to make this change. I think what they think about it varies widely from country to country, or even from region to region within certain countries, within all countries. But it is a simple concept and yet sometimes complicated to explain. And I believe that that often gives politicians a little bit of concern about whether it will be accepted by the public. So from what I have, the activism that I participated in and the lobbying I've done, the conversations I've had with lawmakers, both in Latin America and in the United States, that they need to hear from their constituents. That they, in general, politicians are nervous people because they are constantly subject to political opinion and they're used to being criticized. So if they hear honestly from their constituents that there won't be riots in the street when we do this, then they'll feel more comfortable taking those steps because they'll know they won't be a backlash. And from what I've seen and from what the experts say, the economists say that the dividend portion of this, or the climate income portion of this, where there are payments sent to the people in an equal fashion, that's really the ticket to making this politically viable.
Thank you, Tami. Rafael, would you like to complete?
Yeah, I think this is a challenging task for politicians. They want to do things well, probably, but they need to be elected and supported by citizens. And this is a difficult issue because of the delay effect that I have commented before. The effects and the causes, they are a big lag. I think that 2019 was a significant opinion change in citizens in most countries, at least in Spain, without any doubt. Now we need to carry this message to politicians, and it's not easy. It seems that the European Union Commission is proposing a new Green Deal, but probably not enough, but in a good direction. It's difficult to because there are a lot of washing in the language, but there are a big distance between language and action. Maybe the coronavirus economic crisis could be an opportunity for a good change. Many politicians are saying that we need to go out of this economic crisis with a more nature-friendly model. This is the words, and we expect what are the actions. We want to believe that this is an extensive common sense among European politicians, but as I say, it is one thing is the words, another the actions, and we are expecting about that.
Thank you, Rafael. And I think, yes, you both have a really good point about the fact that politicians need to feel support for actions they put in place. So maybe I can ask you both, what can I do as a citizen to talk to the politicians or to talk to the government to basically have my voice heard? Tami?
So as Rafael said, now is a difficult time, right? We want to give our politicians space mentally and physically to handle the current crisis. It's understandable they're focused on that. But here locally, it's still possible to write to the newspapers because they will, of course, tire of the same news and be looking for other subjects. And from what we have seen here in the United States, some of our legislators have told us that they're actually more accessible now because they're working from home, some of them. So they're in on meetings that they wouldn't otherwise be in on. So it's not a time to be completely silent on the matter, but just to be respectful of, and acknowledging that, of course, there are other things that people are worried about right now. And that we see the connection between the COVID crisis and the climate crisis, and that you hope that legislators would move forward rebuilding towards health.
Thank you, Tami. Rafael?
Well, I have not much experience in that, but I think perhaps it is important. We have seen in Spain and Europe in the last years a worrisome trend to extremism in politics, with a great divide between political parties. And these confronted positions do not help to carry the message of climate income, in my opinion. Some people do not want to hear anything different of their fixed ideological positions. It's difficult to find open-minded people in the political world, in Spain at least. So perhaps it's important in this sense, the non-partisan approach from them. Because if you approach a politician and he or she thinks that you are in the opposite in the opposite extreme, they don't hear you absolutely nothing. So it's important to approach with a scientific and non-partisan view, with figures, objective, and we have a lot of data about climate change and about how we can do in politics a different way to get the things. And the climate dividend framework is a good example. In fact, usually the politicians are not well informed about this policy.
Thank you. And actually, my last question before I open the floor to questions is, how can the idea of tax on carbon be accepted by citizens if they end up paying higher prices? Tami?
Yes, well, that is, as I had mentioned earlier, and it's always good to repeat it. We don't even call this type of plan a tax, because taxes are meant to fund government function. And so what this is, it's an income for people to compensate them for some of the economic errors that have existed. So if you give the money back to the people, then you make it politically palatable. And economic studies show, more than one economic study shows, that what's so beautiful about it is that the people on the lower end of the economic scales end up, although everybody receives the same amount, it makes a bigger difference to the people on the lower end. So up to 2/3 of the population, that's the numbers of the population, will receive more in their climate income than they will pay due to higher prices of goods. So it corrects some of the economic inequalities that we have as well. So the yellow vest protests were due to a very rapid, or very quickly implemented, without warning, tax on gasoline that did not have any clear benefit to the general population. So of course people would be upset. But the idea of climate income is to put the price on pollution very high in the supply chain at the very beginning of it, so that it in fact applies to every aspect of the economy. It's comprehensive. And then we give the money back to the people, and they are made whole. And the majority of them are made whole. And those who perhaps see more increase in their prices than they're getting in their income payments can always choose to decrease their carbon footprint. And in fact, all of the goods will be, people, this is also part of the beauty of it, people don't have to be conscious and aware anymore, because we just keep looking for the less expensive item. And now the less expensive item will be the cleaner, healthier item.
That's great. Actually, I know that Canada has implemented climate income, I believe, last year. Tami, could you just tell us quickly about this?
Sure. Canada is our neighbor, and we love them. And they thankfully implemented, so their prime minister mandated a price on carbon emissions across the country, but he allowed the provinces to decide how they would implement that price. And some of those provinces already had in place a cap and trade plan. And that was considered adequate, although the cap on emissions will need to decrease in order to comply with the national mandate. The provinces that chose to not implement any plan at all were then given the backstop plan, which was what we call carbon fee and dividend. It's the same as the climate income plan. And so that began, I believe, last year, perhaps in 2018. And they have already received their income payments, and that government was in fact reelected. So of course, every election, it's always a little harrowing who's going to win, especially these days, but they found that there was enough approval of that plan that that same government was able to be reelected. So it's been a success and a marvelous example, and I can't wait for other countries to follow Canada's example.
Thank you for sharing, Tami. Rafael, anything else you would like to add?
Well, it's very well. Tami has said all things, but the question is, nobody likes new taxes. People would react very angrily if you only put new taxes. And Tami has said the yellow vest rebellion in France is an example. This is for that we need to put focus better in a climate income financed by carbon taxes. I think that climate income can be the first layer of a universal basic income. After that, we can add more layers financed by other resources. I think that the climate income could be handy to implement the necessary administrative infrastructure to pay a basic and universal basic income. It will be also useful to show people what exactly a universal basic income means in the practice. People will see that nobody is working for that. Universal basic income just increase people's freedom to choose what they want to do. Then it will be easier to add layers with other financing sources, increasing the amount until the quantity enough to tackle absolute poverty. And I think that Canadian experience is very, very useful. Tami has explained very well. And I think that it's a good example for Europe and for the United States to do the same thing.
Thank you. That was so interesting. Big thank you to you both. And now I would like to give the public the opportunity to ask some questions. So I'm going to pass the floor to Belen.
Hello, yes. So we already have a couple of questions raised in the chat. They are asked by Alessandra Donati. So the first one is, how do you envisage to tax pollutants? Which criteria should be applied to identify the pollutants, and which threshold to apply for measuring the polluting activities? Who wants to take the question? Maybe Rafael?
It's a lot of stuff.
Yes.
Really, when we talk about carbon dividend or climate income, we are thinking about a carbon tax equivalent. It's not only over the carbon, it's also over another greenhouse gases. And this is possible to measure this in other countries. In fact, we have the measures. And the better way to tax, to put the fee, is in the place of the fuel is imported or produced in the country. In this way, only in a few points it's possible to collect the fee, and this charge is distributed about all the economy, because every consumer or firm that uses these fuels must pay in an indirect way the fee. So the fee is translated to the final prices to the consumers. In this way, there are some products that will be more expensive, and all the people through the climate income can to choose to buy what they want. If you have a more expensive heater or buses or aircraft, then you can use another mean of transport, another system of heating or so. And perhaps the most important is for firms, because firms make the investment decisions thinking in the future, and they make the investment decisions today for the future. If they know that the tax will be increasing over the carbon, they today with a little tax change the political investment today. So this makes a huge change in the emissions. What is exactly what we need today? We need to make a very big change. So this is I think that this is the answer.
Thank you, Rafael. We have another question as well from Alessandra. You said the revenues coming from this tax should be distributed to people. How to ensure that people will use such income for environmental friendly activities? Maybe, Tami, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So we start by trusting people. So we don't mandate that they use their income for anything special. Economic studies do show that people of lower income will usually begin by spending their money on food and on health, and then on other basic needs. And only after those basic needs are met will they go on to spend it on other things. You know, people in the upper brackets of income, the amount that they would receive in these payments is not very much compared to what they already make. So it's not really going to change their life to receive this income. For example, in the policy, if it were implemented in the United States, would result in $4,400 per family per year after 10 years. So an additional $4,000 a year means a lot to somebody who's only making $20,000 a year. But to somebody who's making $100,000 a year, $4,000 more doesn't make a huge difference. So we trust people, and we also know that the signal from this fee will be contained in the price of all the products. So people will continue to search for the least expensive product, as I'm sure everybody on this phone call does. And by doing that, they will then also be getting the lower carbon products, because it will be built in, as Rafael said, built into the entire economy. I hope that answered your question.
I want to add a thing, because it's the question is that we don't know. People will do what they want, but the question is they are free to choose, and they are not stupid people. Now we are telling people you will be a good citizen, and you must to avoid use the aircraft or the cars and you better use the bicycle, or better you buy fresh vegetables and less other things. And it is a value component, but usually these elections are more expensive. So now, if you want to be a good citizen, it's expensive. And with the tax and citizen income, you can be both a good citizen and buy the cheapest things.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both. So no further questions, but I'm gonna put in the chat the ways that the audience can reach out to us in case they have any question.
Well, I have a question for
sure.
Tami. Yeah, because
sure.
In Europe, it's a good example for us, the Canadian example, but I know that there is a proposal in the Congress in the United States, and perhaps you can explain us how is that?
Sure, definitely. So there is a bill in the US Congress currently called the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. And it was first presented in the previous session of our Congress, and then it was reintroduced in this session in 2019. And it has been, we have two chambers, so it is currently introduced in the House of Representatives and has not yet been reintroduced in the Senate. And it is a bipartisan bill. You know, we have two strong parties in this country, so it was introduced by both a Republican and a Democrat. And we would want the bill in the Senate to also be introduced by a Republican and a Democrat. You know, as I'm sure is true in Europe, it sometimes takes several cycles of reintroduction of a bill before it is approved. It must go through committee and then have votes on it. So we in Citizens Climate Lobby in the US are working very hard, and the volunteers across this country are working very hard, speaking to their legislators and advocating for it. The bill has about 80 co-sponsors currently, and so we're very optimistic. And in our conversations, we hear good things. Political climates are not always easy, and some people are able to tell us that they like the idea of the bill, but it's not possible to publicly state that just at this moment. So that's part of the reason for our optimism, is that our conversations have gone fairly well, but we know that looking in from the outside, it looks like things aren't moving yet. So as with most social movements, there's a growing tension, and then you flip the tipping point, and we're waiting for that and working towards that in the US.
So do you think that there is a possibility that this act was approved? When do you expect could it be?
So we always expect the best, but currently until there is a bill introduced in the Senate, so that there is a bill in both houses, both chambers rather, then it's likely that the bill that is in the House will continue to stay quiet. It is currently in committee, and that it's much easier to lobby for this type of plan once you have a bill. And that was, I was lucky enough to lobby before the bill and lobby after the bill. And the conversation changes once you actually have a bill and becomes much more practical and much less theoretical. And it provides you something very specific to talk about with your legislators, which is refreshing.
Good luck.
Thank you. May we all have good luck.
Well, thank you for your answers. So Eloïse, I don't know how we're doing with time, but maybe we could just take another one if the audience let us.
Yeah, I think we have time for a couple of more questions.
Okay, so we have from Thomas a question for Tami. How many years had CCL Canada lobbied until the climate income has been applied?
That's a great question. It does take time, and CCL Canada worked very, very hard They're super dedicated volunteers. And so the first chapter in CCL Canada was opened in 2011. Kathy Orlando still leads CCL in Canada. And then I believe they implemented it in 2018, and I apologize for not having the exact year on that. But I remember when it happened. I just can't remember the date right now. So that would be, what, 7 years?
Great, thank you. Then James is asking, first, if this is such a good idea, why hasn't somebody already done this? And what is the public response to the policy? Who wants to take it?
Well, Canada has done it. So we are happy about that. And I like to reference, there's a lovely, funny TED Talk by Derek Sievers. It's called How to Start a Movement. And in it, he shows how if there's one person dancing on a hillside on a sunny day, that one person is just a lone crazy dancer until the first person decides to follow him. And as long as it was a him in this case, so as long as that first follower joins in, that creates the space for other people to begin coming in, as long as the leader welcomes that follower and doesn't make it about the leader, but makes it about the movement. And I think we all know Canada pretty well, that they're very nice, and that the next country to do this would be heartily welcomed by Canada so that we can begin the movement around the world.
Actually, sorry, can I just quickly jump in? It just makes me feel like as a citizen, it can be intimidating to go talk to politicians. So Tami, when you started the chapter in Panama, did you have prior experience? And can you tell us about your experience as a citizen lobbyist?
Sure. I had been in Citizens Climate Lobby for 6 months in the United States before I moved to Panama. And it was a conversation that started CCL Panama. I was speaking to somebody here and said, gee, it's such a shame that now I'm going to another country, and so I won't be able to continue with this. And he said, why don't you start a chapter in Panama? And I said, I guess you're right. So we empower all of our volunteers, and CCL empowered me. The teaching that I got, the coaching that I received in terms of how to organize a group, and the materials are available. So, and I spoke with people locally in Panama. So it did take a few months after being there. I didn't go to Panama with that intention. But I found that there was interest. There was a desire to act on climate. People are worried about climate in Latin America. They're very worried about it. They're very aware of it. And so there was room for that, and they wanted an outlet, and they wanted to be able to reach their legislators. You know, it's sorry for the pause. It's people in different areas or different countries have different experiences and relationships with their governments, but there are some universal feelings about the way we react with authority, or interact rather with authority. And so our approach also transforms that relationship. We base everything on relationships because we know that's who humans are. So by empowering people and teaching them how to, as Rafael said, without any partisan politics, you know, we respect our legislators, appreciate that it's a hard job, and then offer them this as a way for them to shine. And that is effective in any country in the world.
Thank you very much. So we have maybe the last question, Eloïse.
Yeah, one more question.
Do we have time? Yes?
One more.
Yes. So Alessandra Donati, I know she's an expert on European law, and she's asking, do you think climate litigation could be an effective way to help to help us on our climate lobbying activities. What do you think about climate litigation? Maybe Rafael or Tami?
I think this is about Europe, so I'm going to defer to Rafael to start.
It's difficult to me. I don't know really. I think in general, I am a scientific and I don't trust I doesn't trust much in litigation, because if you put a litigation process, you are aggressive, and the other part is reacts defending, and this is not the best approaching that we need. We need to get involved the people in a common goal. It's not a fight against the power. Is to convince them that it's necessary that they change, because we all live in the same world, and the climate change is a threat for all of us. So this is my point of view, but it's possible I am wrong. I don't know.
Thank you, Rafael. I would just like to give you the opportunity to just say one more word if there's something you would like to share before we close this session. Rafael, is there anything else you would like to share with people today, knowing that we'll be answering the questions that have been asked that we didn't have time to reply to?
Well, it's very easy. We need to act as soon as possible, because we are late. We are late yet, and we have the knowledge. We know how to do, and just we need to act. It's very easy.
Thank you. Tami?
Yes, I agree with Rafael. Speed is very important, and so is our health. So I would love for everybody on this call, and I'm so grateful you're all here listening, to include health in your conversations, to make this about health, to make it about our bodies, to make it about the air, to make it about the pollution, and because that's one of the driving forces that unites all of us.
Thank you very much. Oh, I see that someone has raised their hand. Judy Hindley, is there something you would like to quickly say, because we need to wrap up after that?
Thank you for introducing the health question. I think a lot more could be made of that. Even the financial co-benefits of health. I find that people, even hard-headed people in power, suddenly perk up when they realize there's money to be saved there as well. If you don't mind my introducing that, but it's a major element that I think we could do more of. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. So I would just like to take the opportunity to let you all know that we operate all around the world. So in the US, but also in Europe. In Europe, we work specifically in different countries, in Spain, in the UK, in France, Belgium, Sweden, Germany, and other countries. But we also operate at the European level, and we go talk to deputies at the European Parliament, because we feel that this is where we have most impact. So Belen has shared with you in the chat the link for the different groups. So it's citizensclimatelobby.org about CCL/chapters. And if you have any questions, if you would like to join, we would be very happy to have you. And you can also share your email address if you would like to sign up to our newsletter and hear more from us. So thank you very much, Tami. Thank you, Rafael, for your time today. I hope that everyone found this as interesting as I did. And I would just like to wish everyone a very good day.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much for having us, and may everybody stay healthy and well.
Thank you very much. And that's the end of our webinar for today. Have a great day.
Thank you. Goodbye.